You're listening to Urban Praise. I'm Roy Patterson. We've got Professor Soong-Chan in studio with us. He is the associate professor at North Park Theological Seminary. He's also the author of the book, The Next Evangelicalism. We've been talking about racial justice, racial harmony, reconciliation, things like that. We met about a year ago at Judson Baptist Church. You were speaking for the Vision Nehemiah service. I was fascinated. You used this illustration. I don't know if you remember or not, but it was an illustration dealing with music that you would hear in an African-American church, and I think you also alluded to music you'd hear in other churches, but just the history and the ethos. Just share a little bit of that, if you don't mind.
The foundation of this is that there are different ways you look at peace, or different ways you look at heaven, and that there are those who come from places of suffering, and you look at peace and heaven differently than those who come from a place of celebration. So the difference between originating out of suffering versus originating out of celebration. The way I often have described this is, the type of music that emerges out of these contexts.
Yes.
So the suffering of the black church and what kind of music emerges out of it, there's actually some incredible celebration that comes out of it.
No doubt.
I get joy when I think about what he's done for me. Well, the immediate context is suffering, Jim Crow laws, slavery. And yet here is this wonderful rejoicing that comes out of that place of suffering. Now you contrast that to music that comes out of places of celebration. And one of my favorite songs happens to be a song called Hungry, and it comes out of the Vineyard Movement in Southern California. And the words are, "Hungry I come to you, for I know you satisfy. Thirsty I come to you." Now those are beautiful words, but you can only take those on a spiritual level. Because the person that wrote that song actually drives a nice Honda, and will drive through an In-N-Out burger and get a nice burger right after he writes that song.
Right.
So he's not really hungry. He's not really thirsty. He's got a milkshake and a couple of fries in him. So I mean, in that sense, he's not really hungry. He's got a spiritual hunger. But because he understands affluence and abundance, he wants to understand suffering. And so in that sense, our theology, our understanding of God, our understanding of Jesus is incomplete if we're only seeing it from one side of the equation. So if all you understand about Jesus is a place of suffering, then you only know half of the story of Jesus.
Got you.
If you're only seeing it from the place of celebration, you only know half the story of Jesus. It's like knowing about the crucifixion, but not the resurrection, or knowing about the resurrection, but not the crucifixion. The first time I was asked to speak at an African-American church, I went to one of my mentors and said, "You've got to tell me what to do." I'm going into this and I'm a little nervous, very cross-cultural experience. So I said, "Tell me what I need to do." And she said, when you preach at a black church, don't stop at the cross. Don't just stop at the stories of the cross. You've got to get to the resurrection.
Amen.
Because in the black church, folks already know about the suffering on the cross. We need to know that there's a hope in the resurrection. And I've taken that to heart to say, when we are preaching in certain circles, they want to know about the cross because they don't have the suffering experience. But then in other circles, they want to know about the resurrection because they're already in the midst of that suffering. And so even in our theology, we need each other. If we don't hear those stories from each other, we would only know half of the gospel message.
That's powerful right there.